So we will have a little change, but the next talk is by Álvaro Barbosa. So Álvaro was one of the first PhD students at the MTG. He finished in 2006. And he has been very far away for many years in Macau, and he's the vice rector of the University of San Joseph. So he's really having a kind of a academic management position, but I think those are very important. In fact, for the success of any field, we need people to have management responsibilities and that can help pull strings and can help defend our field. So I think Álvaro is one of our men. So thank you for being here, and all yours.
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, happy anniversary, happy 25th anniversary to the MTG, and thank you, Xavier, for your introduction. Well, I'm very happy to be back here. It's been a long time. It's been 13 years since I left Barcelona, and I've been in different places in the world. I'm going to try to give you an explanation about how the work that I've done here, once I left, was useful to build up my career, to do the job that I'm doing now, which, let me see if this works. Okay, so right now I'm doing an administrative job, if you will. I'm a vice director for strategic development. A lot of people ask me, how come, coming from a music and technology background, you're working in this field? Well, if you're a musician and a creative person, you have no problem imagining the future, or imagining anything, by the way. So strategic development is actually quite fitting for someone coming from a background like this. And I'm working in the University of St. Joseph in Macau. This is a university that was set up by the Portuguese Catholic University, where I used to work before. And I imagine that many of you don't know much about Macau. Macau is a small place in China. It's a special administrative region of China, like Hong Kong, that was an outpost for the Portuguese to be there for 500 years. So there's a strong Portuguese culture. I'm Portuguese, by the way. And there's a strong Portuguese culture in there. It's an official language, the Portuguese, and we're trying to take advantage of leveraging that in China and Southeast Asia. I cannot give you a talk about Macau today. I'm going to give you a talk about what happened to me before and after I came to the MTG. So the reason why I came to Barcelona was because in 1997, I took an extension course in Santa Barbara in a Create Center at UCSB with Curtis Rhodes. It's Curtis Rhodes over there. And I don't know if you recognize me or recognize him. And that's me next to him 20 years and 20 kilos ago. And Curtis Rhodes started this sound and music design summer schools at the time. I went there to do it with him. And I was planning to do my PhD there. But he told me that he heard about this new group that was being set up in Barcelona. They were going to do a conference at the DIFX in 98. And he told me, why don't you go there and check it out to see if it's more interesting to you, because it's closer to your home. You don't have to come all the way to the US. And that's what I did. I came here. I see Xavier Serra and his group for the first time. I was very inspired by this conference, and I decided to apply to the PhD program here. So this is how I came to Barcelona. You can see here, this is kind of an evolution of what I've done over the last few years, and you can see that from the time that I started working at the university until 2006, which is the time I finished my PhD here, my life was relatively simple. I was just teaching and researching. After that, it became more complicated with many opportunities and positions. And I've been working in several different places. After I finished the PhD, a few years later, I went to work with Chris Schaaf at Karma at Stanford to do my postdoc there. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that work. So let me point out some of the publications that I've done to give you an outlook of the work that I've done. So these papers over here, these journal papers were from before my PhD. So it's basically reflecting the work that I did about network music when I was working here. And then I published my thesis in 2006. And the work that I was doing was to try to map what are the kind of possibilities of network music systems that existed at the time. One of the papers I published was actually become quite famous because it was the first survey about this kind of work. And I focus on one type of collaboration method, which is a shared sonic environments. I develop a system that is kind of a network system that is a little complicated. I don't have time to explain this now, but it was basically a development tool that allowed me to experiment several principles and several techniques and several methods. There was a shared space with client interfaces that you could control music and you could perform collaboratively online. And some of the experiments that I've done allow me to define a few very strong concepts that later on ended up being implemented in some of the technology that is out in the industry now. This is from a spin-off from Stanford University, the JamLink, which is a system for network music, and they implemented some of the features from that result from my PhD. And other systems as well. Alexander Carreau, who was also at the MTG for a while, also developed some systems that were using some of the concepts that were introduced in this. This is in a very early stage, but then much more developed. Then later on, I worked a little bit more on this topic when I was at Karma for doing my postdoc for about 1.5 years. And I worked with Chris Schaaf because Chris Schaaf is the director of Karma and he's also working in this field of network music. So we worked together in trying to analyze how can we overcome the problems of latency when collaborating on the network. And we wrote something about the slow attack sounds and how those are very useful in composing music for the network. So this is also published in that paper. That's Chris Schaaf over there doing our tests at Karma. Yeah, and then the work that I've done at the time has been extensively used, I think. One of the PhD theses here from the Sonic Arts Research Center with Pedro Rebelo, who is also one of the researchers in this field. They actually even remade some of the experiments trying to confirm some of the results, which I'm happy to say that were confirmed, which is a good thing, from my work. Now, beyond that, I also did a few interesting things that lead to the possibility of becoming full professor at the university. Some of them had to do with organizing events, like over here, this is a special issue of the Computer Music Journal from the conference that basically Fabien organized, and Xavier and I were kind of a free ride. It was the SCMC in Porto, and I wrote some interesting recent paper about an experiment I did in Hong Kong University of Hong Kong with architecture students that took 1 semester to, instead of designing buildings, they designed musical instruments. They tried to understand acoustics through designing objects that are musical instruments. And Hong Kong U is one of the top architecture universities in the world. And they are open-minded enough to allow 1 semester for architecture students to explore these new things. And so this is, I was talking about the conference. This is went back in 2009 when we had Xavier, Fabien, and I were involved in this SMC in Porto. And that was before I moved to Macau. Anyway, so the way I thought that would be interesting for you to understand how the work that I've done had an impact was maybe through the PhD thesis that I supervised after I left here. So over the last 13 years, I was able to supervise about 12 PhD theses. I still have 1 or 2 ongoing. And I'm going to highlight some of those so to try to see what kind of fields emerge from the work that I've done. So the first one over there was actually a follow-up of my work. It was a Marie Curie initial training network PhD that was very much related with network music as well, with Nicholas Mackelberg. It was a Swedish student I had. So that was pretty much a continuation of the work that I was doing. Then I was supervising Andy Farnell. Many of you may know him. He wrote this very famous book, Designing Sound, and we were able to actually get his research, the book, to become a research that was his PhD. So you can see there, this is his defense. That's Davide Roqueso over there, Curtis Rhodes in the back, Luis Martins, myself. So these are people that I knew from here, from the MTG, and that we were able to actually get Andy to present his thesis. So it's about procedural audio, his thesis. And finally, one of the most relevant theses I supervised is Pedro Pestana. He designed this automatic mixing system and this is actually a very successful project because it's being now used in a startup, in the 2nd generation startup for automatic mixing with machine learning. He developed about 80 features that are implementing for music mixing. So thinking about all of that, I was trying to see how can all these areas come together and how does it make sense about the work that I've been doing myself. And I think that, if you think about network music, this idea of having adaptive interfaces, which is a lot of the outcomes from my thesis, and this idea of automation and generative systems, it can be all related with what we could call as a behavior-driven interaction. To understand what that is, you can think about a flock of sheep, like over there, and you can actually see there's like this little dot over here. That's the dog. That's by itself, without actually controlling the behavior of the individual sheep. You can actually make them to do very accurate things like going to a small door. So this is how I was trying to create an abstraction of this, some of how these things come together. And of course, this is nothing new. This is being used in many different ways. And I was trying to see how can I use this for the creating of musical instruments. And I start developing some instruments for my own practice that are behavior-driven interfaces somehow. And I start working, this is one of the designs that I've done. I start working with this colleague that I met at Stanford, Victor Gama. He's an instrument music designer. And we start working together and creating music pieces that bring to tangible instruments some of the concepts that we have from computer science and from interactive music. So that today we can think that the musical instrument is a variable in the composition process. You don't have to be constrained by it, and with digital prototyping we can actually do a lot. And I work with Victor. Some of the instruments he designed. We did some artistic work. We went to the Antarctica to collect some sounds that we put together in a very interesting piece that was performed and commissioned by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And also we performed this in Chicago, in Stanford, in different places around the world. I also perform with the same kind of instruments with the Hong Kong New Music Ensemble. This is an ensemble that I work with in Hong Kong regularly. They do a lot of different projects, including network music projects with Zurich, University in Zurich. We've been very active with them, and we try to bring to practice some of the ideas from research into the artistic practice. This is the outlook of one of the pieces I've done with them. You still compose traditional music for instruments, but together it goes with improvised electronics that use a lot of these examples. This is from Macau Art Festival. It was a very big event. Some of my PhD students are performing live with me. I don't have much time to play the concert. I can show you later. And I'm trying to come up with this sense of open source musical instruments where you can provide the specs of the designs that you have, and you can go to a fab lab and create your own musical instrument, because if you create a musical instrument and people don't use it, he will die. So this is basically one of the concepts. Now, just very quick, one final point. If I look at the remaining thesis, well, there's many aspects of this that are part of the work the students have been doing, but I'd like to single out these two theses. One is from João Cordeiro and the other one from José Alberto Gomes, those Portuguese PhD students from Portugal, from the CITAR, the research center I was working for. And they both about soundscapes. They're both about how to use soundscapes in different ways. João Cordeiro is more about how can we have a qualitative analysis of soundscapes, not just quantitative. And José Gomes is trying to see how can we use soundscapes in the compositional process. And I was inspired by this to think about how can we bring this concept of researching only on soundscapes from different perspectives to Macau, and this is one of the projects we are doing now. This is Macau. This is a very small region. It has 2 islands, and there's a lot of interest from the government about soundscapes. They've been interested in measuring the different types of urban scenarios and how soundscapes affect life in those different areas. Even though it's a very small place, it could be a very good lab for research because it has the different typologies of the geographical typologies. We have some research about how in Macau it's so loud that you never have silence in the night, like we have this in green in the analysis from Portugal. We have very particular complaints about noise in the evening. For instance, I wouldn't think that here in Barcelona you'd complain to the police because your neighbors are doing too much noise playing mahjong. This is one of the main complaints in China. And so there's a lot of campaigns about the issue of sound as an environmental aspect. And we are trying to look at it not only from a perspective of measuring noise, but also from a perspective of having a qualitative sensing using the citizens as sensors in a way with the network technology. So we also done a few noise maps of Macau. We use Freesound at first for over the years to be uploading. So if you go to Freesound, you'll notice that there's a major increase of the number of sounds from Macau. It's because I'm doing that with my students, and we also use this as interesting artistic projects from the Shenzhen Architecture Biennale. We designed this pavilion that has a lot of the sounds from the city. And so we are now trying to put together this, what we call the Soundscape Lab, which is going to be, or is already informally a group of people working in research that will probably be going to be focused on using Macau as a lab to test different soundscape aspects. This is the organizations that we have for funding this lab. They are already mostly on board, just mostly from Macau. And this is one of the projects that I'm trying to put together based on all this development. Now, to conclude, it was because I've done all this work that I was able to develop myself first to associate professor, full professor, doing some management on the side. And now I have a saying on the strategy of the university in developing these kind of things because I'm working at the rector's level. I hope that's a good thing, maybe at least for the future of this area. Maybe for me it's more fun to do research, but this is a dirty job and someone has to do it. So thank you very much.